Agud Vintera Boisai. Here we go. We could just go back a couple of lines from the end of the Mishnah on Daf Amud Beis. You go to the Mishnah on the end of Amud Beis, and you go down the Mishnah. It's a long Mishnah that we said it was pretty simple concepts that we're familiar with, and it says Omar Rebbe Yehuda. By me, it's 8 lines from the bottom of the Daf. Zaklal. This is the rule. Kol shemachshavas hazman kodma lemachshavas hamakom. We're actually going to talk about zaklal. There's a rule. When you have a rule, there has to be at least 2 things in the rule. It has to come to include something else. Zaklal, kol shemachshavas hazman. So all Rabbi is saying depends. We're talking about somebody that had more than one thought in his mind. So we're talking about pigul. We'll do Chazarah. Pigul is when a person thinks in his mind, as he's performing the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, he thinks that he's going to eat this animal in a year from now. He thinks he's going to eat it past the permitted time. So, if you're allowed to eat this animal for 2 days, he thinks in his mind he's going to eat it 3-4 days from now. And then he goes ahead and eats it. Here it gets people have a little bit of a hard time here. He eats it, then he's chayav kares. When does he eat it? Anytime after the zrika. Then he's chayav kares. If he didn't eat it, we saw he's chayav malchus, according to one man domer. He's over isser. Says Rabbi Yehuda, if a person had 2 thoughts, it depends which thought came first. Did he have the thought of zman or the thought of makom? We didn't discuss makom, but it's the same idea. He thinks in his mind that he's going to eat this carbon outside of Yerushalayim, outside of the Beis HaMikdash. If it's a carbon that he could only eat in the Beis HaMikdash, he thinks to himself he's going to eat it in Har Nov. If it's a carbon that he could eat in Har Nov because it's a shlamim, so he thinks to himself he's going to eat it in Bet Shemesh. That's chutz l'makom. Chutz l'makom never gets cars. So, says Rabbi Yehuda, Kol shemachshavas hazman kodma lemachshavas hamakom, pigul. If you allow the machshava of time to catch on because you did it first, then it's pigul. V'chayav malav cars, then you'll get cars. V'machshavas hamakom kodma lemachshavas hazman. But if the first machshava was the lesser one, that you're going to eat it outside of Yerushalayim, and only afterwards you had a thought of pigul, Pasal bein bekaris. But what does it mean you had a thought afterwards? What's afterwards? A minute later? 2 hours later? Maybe it means in a different avodah. You had one machshava by shchita, and then the second one you had by Kabbalah. Or maybe it's within the same thing. It's one after another. Boom, boom. What is it? Omar Ilfa. So let's skip to where it says Gemara. Omar Ilfa. Machloik is b'shtei avodas. We're talking about that he had one thought of, I'm going to eat it outside the allotted time by, let's say, Kabbalah, and then by the Zrika, he had another machshava that he's going to eat it outside the place. And in that, Rabbi Yehuda says that you get kares. Why? Because you allowed the avodah in between. There's 2 different avodas. One was the Kabbalah, one was the Zrika. During the Kabbalah, you had a perfect thought of pigul, I'm going to eat it outside the allotted time. And you let it be chal. It grabbed. So that's it. For that moment, it grabbed. So now you chayav kares. 20 minutes later, you went and you did zrika. And during that zrika, you thought, okay, I'm going to eat it outside of Yerushalayim. It's not good enough to undo the machshava they had before, the thought they had before. But if it's during one performance of avodah, you were receiving the blood, and in second number 1, you thought to yourself, I am going to eat this outside the allotted time. And then 10 seconds later, as the blood is flying into your kli, you say, oh, and also I'm going to eat it outside of Yerushalayim. That's a combination of 2 different thoughts. And what happens when you have a combination of 2 different thoughts during pigul? It doesn't work. Pigul has to be pure. It has to be one thought only, not 2 thoughts. So according to Ilfa, if it happened during one avodah, it doesn't matter how far apart within that avodah. Let's say shechita took him. He's a really disgusting person. He's old and he has a really rusty knife and he's shechting slow. It's a 2-minute shechting. It doesn't matter. It's within that 2 minutes. He had one machshav in minute number 1, another machshav in minute number 2. it's a iruv machshavos, the mixture of two different thoughts, then it's not a real pigul. You don't get cars for that. Pigul is by itself, one thought by itself. And this is going, really should have done, maybe Gary could do for me. I like to do those, musogei hashas. Over here, it's the musig in shas called tfais lashon rishon. You should grab on to the first thing that comes out of the guy's mouth. We don't really care. We're not going to ask him any questions. We're not concerned with what he thought and what he's going to tell us later. We're concerned about what is normal. When a person says something, he says, or thinks something. In this case, he thinks / he says it even with his mouth. He says, I'm going to eat it outside the allotted time. Boom. That's the one that goes. Twice, let us pay particular focus, attention to that lashon. What he said afterwards is the lashon sheni. I don't care about lashon sheni. I care about rishon. Says Rabbi Yochanan, even if it's one avodah, during Kabbalah Saddam he had two thoughts, we go with the first one. Now the Gemara does a classic thing. This whole long Mishnah, it's actually a very long Mishnah, because this is the tail end. Our Mishnah that we see here on the Daf Yomi Beis, we already learned is the safe of the Mishnah that we had earlier. It's a long Mishnah. But don't we want to be consistent in the Mishnah? Don't we want to be, if the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about the guy had thoughts during two avodas, so then the end is also two avodas. So no, we're not so concerned. So the Gemara says, the case that when he did the shechita was chutzlas manoi, and then he did the Kabbalah Saddam, he said chutzlam koimai. Two different avodas. So it makes a lot of sense. Now we're talking about two different avodas. That's what Ilfa says. Machloikes b'shtei avodas. And mamish matches the ratio, matches the beginning of the Mishnah. Which I'm not so bothered by it, but the Gemara was bothered by it, so the Gemara knows better. The Reisha is talking about two different avodas. The Seifa, the Reisha is talking about one kazayis, and then the Seifa is talking about a half a kazayis. There's a lot of different cases in the Mishnah. No, for some reason, let's be consistent. The Reisha is talking about, because maybe if you're not explaining, that's the pshat. If the Mishnah is not going to explain itself, so once I know that we're talking about two avodas, so the rest of the Mishnah must be talking about the same case, otherwise it's going to explain it. Maybe that's the pshat. Okay. We're talking about one avodah, not two avodas. In Daf Lamed Amud Aleph and Tav. Yes, you could say such a pshat. Tanan. But we learned in the Mishnah review the Zaklal. I pointed it out. You just read it. This is the rule. If the zman, the pigul came before the makom, then it works. Then you get cars. Because we're talking about one avodah. According to Ilfa, it's only in two avodas. According to Rabbi Yochanan, either one, two, doesn't matter. So I have room in my rule. My rule is one or two. That's why I have to say zaklal. It comes to include even one avodah. Ilfa, my zaklal, but Ilfa says it can't be talking about one avodah. It's two separate avodas. So what's this big rule that you're telling me? You're saying a one halacha. Great, it's not a rule. Kasher, you're right. It's not awesome. Harezu tmura soila tmura shlam. We know tmura. Everybody in MDY knows tmura. Hopefully the whole Klal Yisrael knows what tmura is. Tmura. He's walking with three animals. He has a oila and a shlamim. And he sees this beautiful animal. He says, you know what? That beautiful animal should be both an oila and a shlamim. No, the guy's meshuggah. You can't have two korbanos in one. They're contradiction. An oila goes on the mizbeach and you burn it completely. A shlamim is something you could eat. No connection. But that's what he said. Now there's different ways you could say it. It's a little bit of what we're going to be discussing. Not a little bit, a lot of it of what we're discussing today. How he said it and what did he mean. Look at what is lashon. He says, Tmur harezu, this giant, beautiful, fat animal, is a tmura soila, tmura shalom. He says two times the word tmura. What he could have said is, harezu tmuras oila ushlamim. No. He says, tmuras oila, tmura shlamim. Now I could explain it that he messed up. He realized immediately he messed up. He says, tmuras oila. No, in his mind. The no one knows in his mind. Tmura shlamim. He repeats the whole thing. Why do you have to say another word, tmuras? He could have just said, if he really meant to be crazy and to make one animal two korbanos, he should have just said, tmuras oila shlamim. That's not what he said. He said, tmuras oila, tmura shlamim. Maybe without a pause, with a pause, doesn't matter. But he said the word Tmura twice. Harezit Tmuras Oila. We go with the first Lashon. What do we call that? Tfais, Lashon, Rishon. We grab the first thing that came in his mouth was Tmuras Oila. He said a second later Tmuras Shlamim. No, we go with the first one. Omer Rabbi Yosi. Now I want you to pay attention here because on Amud Beis, the Gemara is going to say Rabbi Yosi doesn't argue with Rabbi Meir, and immediately the Gemara shuts it down. What do you mean? They argue. Here, this is right over here. So remember it. Omer Rabbi Yosi, im lekach neskaven tchila. If he really wanted to make both of them, he wanted to make that one giant, this guy right here on the screen, he wanted to make him a oila and a shlamim. What is he supposed to do? He's not the Rebbeinu Shalom. How is he supposed to say it should be both? So he said, Tmura Soila, Tmura Shalom. That's what he wanted to do. Oh, so in other words, I say, what he's saying is, I say that it should be both. Both of them should be both. So we have to remember this because this is going to come up 2-3 times, maybe 3-4 times even. We might not even mention it, 1 or 2, but let's say it now. What happens when it's both? What? Okay, so it's both. Now what? What do you do? Huh? What do you do? It's both. It's shlamim and oila. Now what? You're not going to bring it to the Beis Hamikdash and bring it as a shlamim. It's an oila. It's kulei Hashem. You're not going to bring it as an oila because it's shlamim. So what do you do? In this case, you take the money and you divide it. Half oila, half shlamim. Okay? This is an addition to that video. In other words, first you make sure it gets a boo-boo. A mum, a real mum, broken leg. Then you sell the broken-legged animal, carbon, and whatever money, you got $100, 50 goes to shlamim, 50 goes to oila. Why? Because it's both. It's a shlamim and an oila. Great. Okay, so we're going to see that 3 times today. It's not important to the sugi. I'm just telling you what happened. But, says Rebbe continues. If he said, I want this to be an oila, I think everybody knows the answer to this question. He said, I want this to be oila. Then he took a nap. V'nimlach. He paused. And then he said, he made a nice pause over there. He stopped. So of course, the first one goes. Okay. So does he argue with Rameir? Absolutely. Saying something completely different. What if he removes that word? Yeah, I think I didn't even show this on Friday, but I mean, it's not a big deal. The first one was Tmuras Oila Tmuras Shlamim. In other words, he says the word Tmuras twice. Now we're asking, what if he says Tmuras Oila Ushlamim? Okay, he just took out the word Tmuras. This is a lot more likely he was serious about making this one animal two different things. Now another question. Lachtzos mao. Here. Chatzi la'oila v'chatzi l'shlamim. Or chatzi oila, chatzi shlamim. Maybe you don't need the lamed over there. The point is, he's literally dividing it. He himself is doing the division. This last case, chatzi oila, chatzi shlamim, certainly Rameir is going to say that he didn't. There's no retraction here. He's actually explaining what he wants. He's saying this one giant animal, this 200-pounder, 100 pounds oila, 100 pounds shlamim. So he's not retracting anything. He's explaining what he wants, and that's why both of them are chal. It's both a oila and a shlamim. Rav Amar Daini Machloikis. Even in this case, where he says chatzi, check it out. He says chatzi la'oila or chatzi oila. Tvois lashon rishon, you grab the first language, and what happens? It automatically spreads to the rest of the animal. Even though he said chatzi oila, it's kulei oila. You, Abayi, say that in this certainly there's no machlokes. No machlokes because he's saying mefurish chatzi. Hari shchita delechi lachtzos dami upligi. What about shchita? We had in the Mishnah, a person shechting, he says, one kezayis is for, I'm going to eat it in 3 days from now, and one kezayis, I'm going to eat it in Bet Shemesh. In other words, he did chutz hazman, chutz hamakom. In one shchita. Upligi. Isn't that lachtzos? In the one shchita, he's doing 2 things. He's saying one kezayis for lamachar, one kezayis bachutz. He's doing chutz hazman, chutz hamakom, and there's still a machlokes. You told me that in this everybody agrees that both of them should happen. If you're talking about shchita, when does the shchita happen? That's another shayla in Shas. When does the shchita occur? Halachically, is it when he starts cutting? And let's say he has, in order for him to chef, and he has a very dull knife, he has to go back and forth 4 times. When did the shchita happen? Throughout the entire 4 times? Or all the way at the tail end when he got the 2 simanim, the trachea and the esophagus. Boom, he cut them, that moment, that's the shchita. So we have machlokes in Shas. So if you say it's the last moment, then the 2 kazesim, the 2 machshavas, the chutz zman, chutz mokim happened simultaneously in the same exact millisecond, because the shchita happened in 1 millisecond. So the 2 machshavas occurred in one millisecond. But you should know, yesh l'shchita m'tchilat soif. Besides the shchita m'tchilat soif, yesh l'shchita m'tchilat soif. When a guy is cutting the shchita, it's a long process, and therefore, as he's cutting the trachea, he thinks chutz zman. As he's cutting the esophagus, he's saying chutz l'makom. It's 2 different simanim. We're not going to go into the whole Rashi or chatzi mater. The point is, it's like a whole thing in itself. 2 parts of the one avodah. For instance, as the Gemara is going to bring in a second, I'll give you a mashal. A guy's walking with the blood from point A to point B. It's 25 feet to get to the mizbeach. Every step that he takes is part of the halacha, but it's another thought. Thought 1, thought 2, thought 3. It's a process. It's not a millisecond. It's a whole process that I could throw in different avodas, especially if it's a whole chelek, like he said. It's a whole piece. It's a whole esophagus, and here's a whole trachea. It's not half of the esophagus and another half of the esophagus. It's this whole siman for this machshava, this whole siman for that machshava. That's the Gemara, very nice. But you can't say your shtickle Torah when it comes to taking a fistful of flour, because over there aren't 2 parts. There's only 1 part. It's this, that's it. How are you going to divide this into 2? Says Gemara, now the Gemara says we're not talking about the kemitza, we're not talking about this part. We're talking about a part that he's not showing in the video. That's the part putting it on the mizbeach. And this goes by itself, and the flour goes by itself. So it's 2 different parts. That's like the shchita that we said before. Says Gemara, very good. When he thought about the chutz zman, it was when he was doing the flour. When he was thinking about chutz l'makom, it was when he was doing the levaina. So it's 2 separate things. A sinner's kmitza or mincha. A guy goes into the Beis Hamikdash betuma, and he can't afford a regular carbon, and he can't even afford a bird. So he said, bring 25 cents of flour. Over there's no levaina. Remember, Mendy Oyerbach said, chayta niskar. And Rashi explains, we don't care about your svara. Hashem said it has to be a terrible, like an ugly carbon without any oil, without any frankincense, nothing. Plain flour. So over there, how are you going to say there's 2 parts? There's only 1 part flour. You're right. Upligi. And there's machlokes over there. Loi pligi. No machlokes over there. Or Ravashi. And comes Rashi and says, you know what? Maybe there's a machlokes over there. Tim Loimar, pligi. Pligi b'psiyos. Because as he's walking with it, in the halacha, there's each one is another machshava. Rav Shimi bar Ashi masnik et Abaya. Rav Shimi holds like Abaya that when it comes to when a person says chatzi, he talks about 1 animal. He says half and half. There's no machlokes. Everybody agrees that he meant to split it up. Rav Huna bar Nasa masnik et Rava that even in a case of lachtzos, there's machlokes. Because Rav Dima Amar Meir B'Shittas Rabbi Yehuda Amara. Rav Dima came, he said, Rabbi Meir holds like Rabbi Yehuda. The Omar, Tfais Lashon Rishon. Rabbi Meir is still going with Rabbi Yehuda that what? Tfais Lashon Rishon. It's not. We learned in our Mishnah. Zaklal. Imachshav says man kodma. It's machshav samako and pigul chayim of cars. Depending what comes first. If Zman comes first, so Zman goes. Omar Abayo. Omar Rabbi Rav Chana. Daf Amud Beis. When you really want to look into it, so I pointed out before, we have machlokes Rameir and Yosi. Says Gemara, they say straight out it's a machlokes. Omar lei pligi b'mayde pligi. I love this lashon. Pligi b'mayde pligi. They argue what they argue. Pligi b'mayde lei pligi, and they don't argue what they don't argue. Meaning that they both agreed that you don't say twice lashon rishon. A second ago we said that Meir holds like a that you say twice lashon rishon. No, they both agree there's no twice lashon rishon. Why the Omar Rabbi Yisrael Bar Rabbi Yochanan? Hakol moedim hechad the Omar tochel zu v'achikach tochel zu. When a person says, "I want this to apply itself, I want it to be a chutz zman," and then he says, and afterwards, I want this to be chutz zman, and afterwards it should be chutz makom. Because he said it first should be this, and then it should be that. So the first thing is what applies itself. But if he says, he makes a stipulation, he makes a condition, he makes a t'nai, lo tachol zu elam kein chol zu. The only way I want the chutz zman to work is if there's a chutz makom. So I'm sorry, we're talking about an animal here. The only way I want this animal to be a tmuras oila is if it's also a tmuras shlamim. So then it becomes both. It becomes a oila and a shlamim. And what do? Yirachi, you starve, kevis land, then you take the money, and you put it in the pushka, you put half oila, half shlamim. Keep ligi do ama tmuras oila, tmuras shlamim. The Omachlaikis is when he says the double lashon here, if you want to see the top one, he says the lashon that seems like he's saying two different things. He should have said the middle line. He should have taken out the word tmura, and he didn't do that. Obviously, he's retracting. He in middle of a sentence, mid-sentence, no, tmura shlamim, maybe not tmura soila. No, he couldn't have said the middle line over there. He's thinking to himself, how could I say Tmur Zoyla Shlamim? That would mean 50-50. Each one, this animal should be 50. No. I don't want 50-50. I want 100%. Remember the Kula Ayla Ukula Shlamim. Whatever that means in his mind. He wanted it to be 100% Ayla, 100% Shlamim. And what do? You actually starve. And you divide the money. Have your Omar lei, who Omar loy pligi, v'ana mini pligi. I say that they do argue. In other words, even when a person says the middle line tmuras oila ushlamim, Meir is going to hold tfais lashon rishon. I go with the oila, and I ignore the shlamim. Omar ula. Here's a geshmak sugya. It's a fun sugya but you got to pay attention. It's really interesting sugya. Like you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. Does anybody here in Bavel? I'm here. I'm on a trip to Bavel. I need to know if you Bavloy. What do you say? Kizais kizais or kizais ukizais. So the Gemara explains. Kizais ava kizais ukizais. They are called iru machshavas. Maybe. The Mishnah was talking about kizayis. But when it says ukizayis, now the two thoughts go together. What happens when they go together? Is it pigul or not pigul? This is a trick question. Huh? Why not? Because you have to have a clear, pure machshava. And when you mix two machshavas together, it ruins it. It's not real pigul. It might be possible, but you don't get cars. Perhaps no. It's a number two. He breaks it down as two separate thoughts. And what do you do in the two separate thoughts? Twice lashon rishon, very good. Ilam's holding. If the vav, which is more likely that it's one thing, he breaks it down to two. So certainly, if there's no vav, it's completely two, and therefore twice lashon rishon, and whatever he said first should go. Tashma. Oh, here it gets super interesting. Now over here you need this chart. Like you gotta flow with me. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're gonna do it slow though. Well, as slow as we can do before the Israelis start coming in here. Toshma, Rebbe. Levi asks Rebbe. Rebbe's the one that authored the Mishnah. Now he could ask him whatever he wants. What did you write in the Mishnah? What's this question? What number did we just say? 3. He said the word kezayis once. L'machar b'chutz. It's both. L'machar means chutz l'zman, b'chutz means chutz l'makom. That's number 3. What's the halacha? He asks Rebbe. Now, why didn't he ask Rebbe any other question? That's the cheshbon of the Gemara. Well, he had the opportunity. He's in front of Rebbe, the Galad Dar. Why didn't he ask him, what's the halacha of kezayis u kezayis? Omer lei zu sheila. Wow, that's a very good question. Eiru machshavas havi. You should know that number 3, like we kind of anticipated, it's a mixture of machar and chutz because he stuck it into one kezayis. He didn't say kezayis, kezayis. He didn't say kezayis u kezayis. One kezayis, boom, you're done. That's the most obvious, but it's a good question. He tells him. Zu sheila. Omer the fun of Rebbe Shimon Rebbe. So now Rebbe's son, he has more access to his father. He says, listen. Didn't you teach us in a Mishnah? And everybody's, there could be these Mishnahs were even before Rebbe. There's a Mishnah in Zevachim, Daf Amud Beis. It says, Lecho kezayis b'chutz, kezayis l'machar. It says, kezayis, that's number 1. Kezayis l'machar, kezayis b'chutz. Kechatzi kezayis b'chutz, kezayis l'machar. Kechatzi kezayis l'machar, kezayis b'chutz. All these cases, pasal vein b'kars. So, Reb Shimon, Rebbe's son, tells him, Ha'iduch, Irav Machshavas Havi. Why does the Mishnah use case number 1? Tell me case number 3. I'll tell you why. Because case number 1, you could separate. You could say, Tfais Lashon Rishon. But not in case number 3. That's why you, Tati, you didn't put case number 3 in the Mishnah. You said case, kezayis. Otherwise, you would have put in case. It's obvious from the Mishnah that case number 3, it's so, I don't understand why Leiba even asked you. He should have just read the Mishnah and see that we're talking, the Mishnah says kezayis. And it's obvious that just kezayis by itself, there's no pigol. Omar lei, he said, Hu shoal bidvar chochma v'at amras Mishnah seinu. He's not upset at him. He tells him, listen, you don't understand. I taught you one thing, and I taught him something completely different. I taught you 1 and 2. So you can figure out that number 3 is Pashat, it's Eruv, it's a mixture, and there's no pigol. But Levi, I only taught him 1. Which one? Let's go with number 1. Kezayis. And he heard Rabbanan say that they learned 2, 1 and 2. Even kezayis, he heard them talking about. And then he thought to himself, the di dafka, what Rebbe taught me, which is number 1, that's the only one he taught. And they messed up a little bit. They added number 2 there, and it's a mistake. And number 2 would be probably a mixture of machshavas, just like number 3. Number 2 is also, because he said kezayis. When I say number 2 and everybody's like on Spotify and they don't see what I'm talking about, I feel bad. Sometimes I'll explain it. Number 2 is kezayis u kezayis. Okay. But he was confused there. Maybe Rebbe actually taught them that 1 and 2, you could break it up. Well, did they shirely? And he didn't tell me everything. He only told me 1. So then, just like he didn't tell me the rest of the cases, he only gave me 1 case. He didn't tell them all the cases, and he probably left them case number 3, and that would teach us that the case number 3 is Eruv Machshavos. Now, which one did he teach his son? Levi. Which one did he teach Levi? Which one did he teach him? Did he teach him number 2, the middle one? And that's considered what? 2 separate machshavas, because he said, even if he said a vav. Now, if that's considered 2 machshavas, what about number 1? 100%. Even if he says kezayis u kezayis, which is more likely that it's connected, and he says it's not connected, so of course number 1, where he doesn't say he says kezayis, it's certainly not connected. That's considered 2 separate machshavas. Haylav shiuru. That's posh. He didn't leave anything out. Of course, Rabbi is going to hold that Tfais Lashon Rishon in number 1. That's certainly separated. Elo kezayis asne. Oh, it says before obviously he taught his son the first one. Kezayis. Because if he taught him the second one, it would be obviously what the first one is. He taught the first one. Now the question is, what did he teach Levi? Why didn't Levi ask him a different question? Why did he ask him number 3? What's the halacha by Kazai's plane? He should have asked him, what's the halacha by Kazai's Ukazai's? I'm only, like Ari said, I'm only asking him one question. So let me ask him one question. I'll be able to figure all this stuff out from it. And here it goes. If I can't ask him, if I ask him Kazai's Ukazai's, so it depends what he's going to answer me. I have to anticipate the answer. It's cool. I'm telling you, it's geschmack. If I ask him number 2, what is he going to answer me? It depends on what he answers me, then I'll know or I won't know. If he tells me that it's mixed in, everything's mixed, it's one machshava, so then, if number 2 is one machshava, then certainly number 3, where he only says one kazais, everybody agrees with me. That's pashut. But the problem is, but what if he says number 2 is you break it down? Now I'm stuck. I don't know what the halacha is in number 3. If you break down number 2, for sure you break down number 1, but what about number 3? I don't know. So that's not a good question to ask him. Listen to this. Hold on. That's not a good question to ask. I only have one question. Because I don't know what the answer will be. Depending on the answer, if he answers me that it's broken down, number 2 is broken down, then I don't have a good answer in number 3. Did I skip that? Did I say it? But if he tells me it's broken, number 2 is broken down, I don't know. Says Gemara, so what did he gain? And what did he ask him? He asked him number 3. So why is that good enough, that question? If he says that number 3 is broken down, then the whole list is broken down, that's for sure. What if he if he tells him it's mixed machshavas, so now he only has an answer for number 3 and he won't know what to do with number 2. On that the Gemara says, listen to this one. Is anybody holding with me here? You won't know anything. You'll only know 3, you won't know 2, and certainly not 3. Yeah, you won't know anything. Yeah. Says the Gemara, listen to this, and then we're basically done. You have to use body language over here. It depends how a Rebbe answers. If Rebbe says, what are you talking about? Of course it's mixed machshavas. Then number 2 is also mixed machshavas. Like what's wrong with you? Why are you asking such a silly question on number 3? But if he says, oh, that's a good kasha, that number 3 is mixed machshavas, then I'll know that number 2 is not. You hear? Based on his kas, on Rebbe's kas. If number 2 is a mixture, number 3 is certainly a mixture. What do you ask me such silly questions? So that's why he said, I'm going to pick this question, kizais, and not only am I going to listen to what he says, it's a mix, but I'm going to say how he says it. It's a mix, shoita, like not the shoita, it's not going to say that. He'll say it with a red face. Rabbi Sai, a good winter, Yishkoyach for coming.
Merit the schus of spreading Torah throughout the world. Sponsor a shir today. MDYsponsor.com or sponsor at MDYDAF.com.